Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about F. Wesley Schneider's Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. We're going to talk about Lord Bacaris's Steel Spring Strike, and we're going to talk about two aspects of it: wrong bravery, and we're going to talk about personal loss. All right. So, Lord Bacaris is this very arrogant noble from Vogler. The player characters are now in Calamon, and while the player characters are helping to Tina Rukeldust, Lord Bacaris takes a force of Calamon soldiers and Knights of Solamnia and leads them to Steel Spring, right? And he goes there specifically to engage the Red Dragon army, right? And he leads these Calamon soldiers and these Knights of Solamnia into a situation where they're overmatched, right? I want to say ambush, but it's not really. It's not the correct term. But he leads them into a massacre, right? And a lot of his force die. Okay, was Lord Bacaris right to surge out with a force that was given to him by the governor of Calamon and attack the Red Dragon army, or was he wrong? Well, it's easy to say he was wrong because it failed, but I don't think he was fully wrong. And here's the question: is wrong bravery more valuable than right cowardice? Right? If he'd be like, oh no, if he had been, oh, the Red Dragon army, we don't know enough about them yet. Oh, their forces are too strong. There's too many, right? I can't lead a force out 30 miles west of Calamon to, Steel Spring in the Inkwater, river crossing. I can't attack them there because I don't have enough information, right? Well, here's the thing: we already know from history that Lord Bacaris was not completely wrong, right? In the Civil War, President Lincoln suffered from coward generals, right? Who were like, oh, if I attack here, I could lose lots of men, right? Well, here's the issue: it's war. Lives are a currency that are going to be spent, right? So Lord Bacaris fails to defeat the Red Dragon army, but he succeeds in saying blood will be shed. This is a war. This is not a waiting contest. This is not this isn't a staring contest, right? Blood's going to be shed. And here's the issue, right? You can say what you want about Lord Bacaris, right? And he was wrong, and a lot of good men and women lost their lives because of his wrong bravery, right? But I think it's actually more valuable than right cowardice, right? And the reality is, no wars don't get won without the loss of lives. Lives are spent as a currency to win war. So Lord Bacaris sparks, right, Calamon, and says, we're not going to sit in these walls. We're going to go out and reap. Let's kill some Bay's Draconians, right? Let's kill some Dragon Army soldiers, some humans and some orcs and some goblins and some hobgoblins and some minotaurs and some ogres. Let's get some blood on these swords, right? And so while Lord Bacaris it's easy to say, oh, he didn't know what he was doing. The reality is the spark, right, that comes off of his sword when he goes against the Baz Draconians is what's going to light the fire that is going to defeat the Red Dragon army. So he was wrong here, right? But I will say, right, in my humble opinion, his right bravery is better than his wrong bravery is better than right cowardice, right? And so it's more valuable, right? You do not win wars without being willing to spend lives as a currency for success, right? Second, right, personal loss. So one of the things that happens is, so Lord Bacaris goes with Knight in Training Darrett, right? The player characters go to Steel Spring and they actually aid in the retreat, right? But guess who does not retreat? You have Lord Bacaris, but Bacaris the Younger went with Lord Bacaris, and he is lost in the fray, right? And while Knight in Training Darrett, while the player characters, while Lord Bacaris all successfully retreat, right? Bacaris the Younger is left for dead, right? They don't know if he's dead or alive. He is assumed to be dead because there's just blood and fire everywhere, right? And here, this is very interesting. We get to this point, and it's a very interesting point where Lord Baccharis reaches Calamon, and he is distraught, right? He doesn't care that, depending on how well your player characters did, maybe 25 soldiers died, maybe 250 soldiers died, right? He don't care about none of that. All he cares about is that his own son could be dead. So it's interesting that when we go to war, right, whether that's quite a literal war, right? Right now, America's quite literally deciding if we're going to own Russia, right? I think we should. We should let's get all in with the Ukrainians, just fight side by side, take Russia, split it between the two of us. That would be great. I think that would be the best way to go, right? So we right now, right, are challenged with war decisions, right? And then we also have, because we're dungeon masters, we also realize what are the wars of our lives, right? What are the personal wars of our lives? What are the virtual wars of our lives? We kind of went just through a virtual war, right? Professor Dungeon Master said that there was a war for the solo Dungeons & Dragons in January of 2023. I agree with him. I think he was 100% right? We have wars that come up, right? And when war comes up, there's two types of loss, right? There's a practical loss. The loss, Lord Baccharis witnessed the practical loss of soldiers. Those soldiers needed to die, right? This is a war against the Red Dragon army. It's not going to be won by waiting, right? There's practical loss, right? When you go to war, you practically need to kill, and you practically need to be killed. There's a number of people who are going to die in a war. That's what a war is, right? And that's why I love F. Wesley Snyder's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Is it's an open discussion of war in a time of war. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It's incredible, right? And that's another thing. Did F. Wesley Snyder put this Dungeons & Dragons canon hardback? Did he give it to us right now to help Americans process the decision we'll need to make, right? Like, do we elect coward President Biden so that there be 4 more years of fear and rising egg prices? Or do we get DeSantis so we can go wreck and take Russia, right? For us and the Ukrainians, they can have a little bit too, right? It's a good question. F. Wesley Snyder's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen helps us to answer these questions, helps us to do an IRL abstract modeling of it beforehand, helps us to see what dungeon masters and players are going to see what it's like to lose 25 people that they know in Calamon, that they met in Calamon, that they drank with in Calamon. You as a player, you have your IRL identity. You also have your player character identity. You met these Calamon soldiers that you come to save. Some of them you bring back safely. Some of them die, and you see them on the battlefield bleeding out. You know what I mean? And that gives us a chance to experience war before we make decisions about war, right? And that's what I'm telling you. D&D canon hardbacks, they don't function like regular books, right? These are IRL abstraction modeling, right? To help us choose literally the government we will have in the next 4 years, right? The ramifications of Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen are deep. Deeper than anything you're going to find in OSAE. Deeper than anything you're going to find in DCC. Deeper than anything you'll find in Pathfinder, right? And so it's really interesting. There's this practical loss and there's this personal loss. Lord Baccharis loses his son, and you could lose 250 soldiers. Who cares, right? If his son is lost, that's different. Personal loss, right? So as we go into this decision, whether to take Russia and just make it ours and give a little bit to Ukraine, what will be the practical losses? I think all of us are ready for practical losses, but are we ready for personal losses, right? And F. Wesley Snyder puts the question right to it, right? He's like, are you ready for practical loss in war? Are you ready for personal loss in war? It's incredible. It is, and it's beautiful, right? And it far surpasses anything Hickman or Weiss ever did with Dragonlance. They didn't time like IRL abstraction modeling the way F. Wesley Snyder is doing, in my humble opinion. Every word of that is my humble opinion. What are you seeing when you read Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen? I'd love to hear it. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.